traditional and more modern, and their effects on modern businesses as we combat rising costs and shrinking margins. We will be recording this webinar and distributing it afterwards. So if you signed up, you'll be included on that message later. What we're going to look at, going to give you a quick background into our business. We're going to look at the traditional drivers and needs for business improvement. Going to introduce what the Industry Forum Common Approach is. We're going to look in detail at elements of key performance indicators, time-based scheduling, and key activity indicators, and other bits, looking at the impact on the modern business and what we can do in order to offset these challenges and maintain successful, healthy businesses. If we have any questions, it isn't the end of the presentation, although I know it looks like it, and some of you probably hope it is already. If you could post your questions in the chat or in the Q&A functions, Kirsty will keep on top of that and let me know. The plan is that we will pick up any questions at the end. So, as a business, our business is focused on making manufacturers more competitive. The kind of tools that we use include Lean, Six Sigma, Kaizen, TPM, but we don't just train in those. Our main focus is to look at how we can use manufacturing as a driver for competitive advantage, looking straight through from the beginning of the process, the competitive strategy and the management systems supported by new product introduction and lifecycle management, getting into the grips with the manufacturing operations, and also looking beyond that in terms of the supply chain. So understanding our business suppliers and also measuring outbound logistics and customer satisfaction for business improvement. As a business, we have four main capabilities: competitive strategy and market management systems, new product introduction, life cycle management, manufacturing operations and supply chain. Whilst we provide consultancy and training, the key thing for us is on top of people learning new skills, it's the actual coaching and implementation of those skills to provide business benefits. So it's working with organizations and individuals to make sure we go beyond the issuing of certificates and transfer of knowledge, but also support them through the implementation to make their jobs easier and ultimately their businesses more effective. And obviously, as a business as well, we are very much involved in the IATF 16949 and VDA quality systems, training and auditing. A number of areas that we deal with, from VDA to IATF to APICS, and as Industry Forum, we deliver consultancy and training under the Quality Management Division brand. Now, if you're running a manufacturing business in the UK right now, you don't need too many headlines to tell you that times are tough. In the last 5 years, minimum wage has risen in the UK by 40%. Electricity has more than doubled. Gas has more than doubled. Changes to national insurance makes it more expensive to employ people. And there's similar disruption and challenges associated with raw material supply, fuel costs, waste disposal, business rates. All of these things tend to be going in one direction and it isn't down. All of this basically means that margins for all producers are under severe pressure, and some of the stuff that we want to talk to today will give us an understanding of what we can do in order to help stave off some of that pressure and give us some breathing space. But, you know, speaking for the automotive industry and also the aerospace industry, there is genuine concern at the top levels over business viability as you go down the supply chain. Typically, OEMs and tier ones are big businesses. They have significant resources at their disposal, but they're not immune to these challenges. But the further you go down, the lower the level of accessible resources can be, and there are genuine concerns at the top level that tier 2, tier 3 plus businesses may be under such severe pressure that they cease to exist in the next 6 to 12 months. And the knock-on impact to that, to the tier ones and the OEMs, is significant and of genuine concern. So our good old-fashioned need for continuous improvement and trying to understand the basics of why we do what we do. Looking traditionally, in order to understand how much to charge for something, we need to understand how much it costs for us to make and what we want to make as a business on top of that. And one of the things we always try and do with businesses, particularly at an operational and shop floor level, is to get them to understand that the purpose of a business is to make money. It's not there to make parts for cars or aeroplanes or machinery. It's there to make money. So ultimately, the business exists as a vehicle to produce a return on investment from the shareholders. Now, the good old days, and to be honest, many situations this is still the case. In order to work out how much something's going to cost, you need to break it down in terms of materials, direct materials, indirect materials, consumables, direct labor, indirect labor, all of the kind of overheads and utilities that go into it. And it'll give you a number to which you add some kind of profit or margin, and it comes with an asking price. Now, what we say with the profit is that profit isn't simply there to reward investors. It is important, and that's an important part of any business, but it's also something that's used and reinvested in the business to make sure that we have access to the latest technology. We can grow the business through acquiring new people, new products, new premises. So profit is a really important part of the modern business. And if you're lucky enough to work in a marketplace where you are the sole provider of something in the whole world and nobody else can do what you do, you go with an asking price and your customers have a very simple decision. They either pay the money or they go without. Unfortunately, most of us live in a position where the products or services we provide are subject to competition, both domestically and internationally. And as a consequence, instead of a cost plus type discussion we have with our prospective customers, quite often it's a cost down discussion whereby there are other companies in or around the world that say they can do what you do for the same sort of money, which has the effect of depressing the price. Now, in order to make similar levels of profit, we need to address our costs. And this is what this is all about, is trying to understand where our costs are, what we can realistically do to manage them. Going forward, the general price pressure tends to be downward. So people generally want to pay at least the same as, if not less than they did last year for the same goods or services. During that time, our internal cost pressures rise. We talked about the increase in national minimum wage. We talked about the increase in utilities, gas, electric, fuel, all of these sorts of bits and pieces. So that is where all of our margins come under significant stress. And the need for business and continuous improvement is to help us identify and realise improvement opportunities. That is the very crux of what we do, particularly within operations management. Our common approach was developed in the late 1990s through, at the time, the only time that Honda, Nissan and Toyota worked together. So what we did over a period of years was develop a common approach based on the Honda, Nissan and Toyota production systems, which basically is summarized by a little temple of continuous improvement here. The Plan, Do, Check, Act is a cycle. The Deming Wheel continuous improvement cycle is fundamental to what we do, but so are the building blocks in terms of, at the very foundation, 5S, 5C, or workplace organization, supported by process analysis, 7 or 8 wastes, supported by visual management and standardized work. Now, we focus on these because regardless of the industry that you're in, these building blocks will have a significant impact on your ability to control and improve your processes. And as an individual, I've worked across automotive, aerospace, ceramics, vehicle recycling, food industry, all of these places. All of them are very much applicable when it comes to workplace organisation, process analysis, visual management, and standardised work. So these bits work wherever you go. There are some specialist bits relating to maybe problem solving, line balancing, setup improvement. All of those build on these 4 basic building blocks. And it was something that one of our previous chief executives identified 20 years ago, that the tools and techniques of business improvement are really important. They are necessary, but in themselves, they are insufficient. Beyond that, we need to develop operational leadership and understanding of what's going on and the capability of our people in order to put us in the best place for long-term survival. Very simply, I like to think of management is made up of 3 key characteristics. First off, we need to understand what's happening. Once we understand it, we can control it. And once we've got control of it, we can look at making improvements. So we need accurate and as close to real-time data to support objective understanding of what is actually happening at the moment. That's the first thing that we must make sure that we do. Secondly, once we've got a full understanding of what's happening, we can put some controls in place. And finally, once we've got that control, we can look to implement improvements. If we don't have an understanding and control, the improvements won't last. They won't be what we would consider to be sustainable. They'll work as long as somebody's keeping an eye on them, but as soon as somebody turns their back, it goes back to what it was previously, unless you get those first 2 bits of understanding and control in place. Our common approach was based on 4 philosophies. That is, we're here to make money. We're here to keep the customer happy, involving everybody in the improvement process, and finally cascading the know-how for continuous activities. So we go from that kind of activity-based improvement activity to something where it becomes part and parcel of our normal day-to-day roles. Once we get that, ultimately, that's where we want to get to. This obviously comes through in our building blocks. We have some spirits of business improvement that I'll come back to later on. And finally, the output is measured in terms of, or was measured in terms of, the 7 areas of competitiveness, focusing on quality, cost, and delivery. Thinking of key performance indicators, every business these days has, or certainly should, if not, if they haven't, they're in big trouble, an understanding of what is going on in their business from a key performance indicator perspective. As a consultant back in the early 2000s, we worked closely with what was then the Department of Trade and Industry, and it was part of our role was to deliver measurements against these 7 measures here. But mainly it was focused on not right first time, the quality, people productivity, the cost and delivery schedule achievement, the delivery aspect of it, in addition to, if there's an automated process, the overall equipment effectiveness. But what we have found is that obviously this information tells you what's happening. Provided it's good data, it can help drive good decisions at an operational level. It's absolutely vital to understand what is actually happening, and if you're making changes or improvements, to see whether those changes or improvements are having the desired effect. It's important to use real data and numbers. Quite often, KPIs can be manipulated in order to present a picture that's convenient for the author, not what's actually happening. You've got to be really, really careful about that. In using your key performance indicators, it helps you set realistic targets and improvement plans and understand how you're performing against those. And like I say, needs to be monitored as close to real time as possible. When I started in industry in the 1990s, I remember we used to work for a week, roll up the numbers on a Monday and publish them on the following Tuesday. By that time, the whole week had gone, and anything that had gone wrong, there's nothing we could do about it. If you think about the driving any kind of modern vehicle, it's very difficult to do that without your dashboard working. If, like me, you've driven to work this morning and you come up across one of those nice white vans on the side of the road with a camera pointing at you, the first thing you tend to do is check your speed to make sure it's in line with the road you are travelling on. If that information was either inaccurate or telling you anything other than real-time information, it's next to useless. So trying to think about that kind of data dashboard for the business at both a macro level, what's happening to the business, and micro levels, be it cells or units within the business. It's really important to help us understand day-to-day performance. So our not right first time was basically a measure of the parts that we made that didn't meet spec, divided by the total parts made. And we tended to always report those in parts per million, because obviously 10% sounds a lot better than 100,000 parts per million. So it does help us focus on those. The problem, obviously, if you're a smaller manufacturer, the ppm numbers can be significantly higher, simply because of the lower volumes that you're producing. It's important to make sure that we include any work that required rework in order to make them good, but also that we have details of the non-conforming parts in order to understand the underlying reasons and apply preventative actions. So whilst this might be a level 1, level 2 might be a breakdown by type or cause of mistakes, so you can target improvement activity accordingly. Productivity, good old-fashioned number of good units made divided by the hours that were required to make them, measured in parts per operator hour. Obviously, from a productivity perspective, you want to make more good units in less time. Again, useful to use at micro and macro levels, so within production cells or even in, by team leader kind of level, right up to organizational levels. If you have a standard cycle time, it helps you understand how long something should take to make in terms of a batch, so you can plan the work coming up, and we'll come on to that again later, because it's really important to make use of available capacity. Also, within the hours that you use in the calculation, it's interesting. Some people say, should we only use the people involved in the process, i.e. the direct operators, or should it include indirect operators such as team leaders, setters, maintenance people? The fact is, whatever you do, you need to be consistent. I would suggest that you definitely include direct and any local leadership. But if you're not going to include things like logistics and maybe maintenance, that their effectiveness is measured somewhere else, so it isn't secret, it isn't invisible, but something you can manage. The other one is that whether you should use net or gross rate for any overtime hours or shift work hours that are put in place. So, for example, if your business pays overtime at time and a half, should you use 1.5 hours rather than the standard 1 hour for it? Again, I say be consistent. Always, from my perspective on here, it's about making sure you use numbers to understand what's happening and drive improvement. They are not there to give you an easy time with your boss. If there's a problem, he needs to know or she needs to know, and what it is you plan to do about it. So, one of the things that we always look at, even though these numbers are quite basic, is digging into them to check that the units, the measures that are being displayed are real rather than imaginary or manipulated. And like I said, we're going to come back to time-based planning and scheduling in a minute, but once you've lost an hour in production, you can't get it back, or rather, you have to pay for it at the end of the day or over overtime rates in order to try and get these things back. Overall equipment effectiveness is an important measure, particularly if you have automated elements of your process, where availability, performance and quality is looked at, and it's measured as a percentage, where availability looks at how much time the process ran versus how long it was planned to run. Performance looks at how much it could have made in the time that it was running, and quality looks at, of those ones that were made, how many were right first time. When it comes to performance or any of these bits and pieces, it shouldn't be possible to have any element over 100%. That's the first thing we look at, is when people modify or manipulate the performance figures to give them a decent number. If anything comes out at over 100%, it's not a real number. And as you're multiplying each one of these bits and pieces together, if each of your elements are at 85%, your OEE is not 85%, but it's 85 times 85 times 85, which comes out at 61%. The reason behind this is it helps you drive further improvements, whether it's availability, which is typically breakdowns and changeovers. Performance tends to be influenced by lots of short stops, and obviously quality. You pump in the numbers that we got from our not right first time calculation earlier. OEE is really helpful, more and more so, but it requires robust and accurate data. There's lots of people who go straight to automated shop floor data collection, but for me, to understand the manual capture before you do that is really important. So you basically don't come, computer says no or computer says yes kind of business. You understand what's going on. You're making sure that the automation is collecting the right information. There are some great products out there that clip onto your machines that help you understand when things are running and when they're not. Which is great at a certain level, but beyond that, it requires some kind of interaction with an operator or professional to say when it isn't running, why isn't it running, and to get to the bottom of that, because those are where your opportunities are. And if you're engaging in a total productive maintenance program, then OEE is an absolute cornerstone and essential element of any of those kind of programs. Finally, delivery schedule achievement. It's the number of failed deliveries divided by the total number of scheduled deliveries. Failed deliveries can include things that are less than the order quantity or delivered early or late, particularly if you're delivering to a production line. You will have a slot in which to deliver. They will turn you away if you turn up early because they're just not geared up to take those sorts of bits and pieces. So it's really important to make sure you understand that. There is debate as to whether each delivery is considered individually or as a volume or quantity of items. So if you deliver one delivery of 100 parts, is that 1/1 or is it 100 over 100? Again, whichever you do, be consistent, but I would suggest using both, because if you have a product volume variety mix where you deliver a reasonable number of high volume orders, but also a reasonable number of low volume orders, you can keep an eye on whether you're doing well at both, because typically the high level orders, the high volume orders will bring in more cash, but there may be more margin in the smaller stuff. So you want to make sure you're keeping an eye on both. It's most often used to measure external performance. So your customers will be measuring you, you'll probably be measuring your suppliers, but it can also be measured internally. So it's helpful to try and set up some kind of scheduling and performance management of how well internal supply chains are performing in order to drive team working, collaboration, and ongoing improvement. And obviously, you need to understand any kind of details for any failed deliveries in order to make future effective countermeasures. So, data and the use of available capacity. So quite often what we find is that companies tend to plan based on Monday we need to make a certain number of products, and Tuesday we need to make a certain number of products. What we tend to encourage is that instead of having a simple planning sheet, we convert that into some kind of time-based thing. So if we know what the product day cycle time is and what the setup time should be, we can say with reasonable certainty when product A should be finishing and when product B will be starting. And then similarly for product C. The importance of this is to understand any issues relating to delays, which could be slow running. And obviously over a day, if you're making 3 or 4 different parts through a single resource, the compound effect of these kind of slow running can have a significant impact on the available capacity that you've managed to use, and you also need to understand the reasons for that kind of slow running. Similarly, you can have short stops in there. Typically, if something is stopped for less than 2 minutes, people don't tend to note it. But if you have 30 of those in a day, they can be very significant. So trying to think about how you can capture those, be it manually or automatically, and then the bigger kind of changeovers or breakdowns. The reason that we want to be looking at these sorts of things is that we typically would be looking at single minute exchange of die or changeover improvement type activities to support this, which are very, the obvious comparison is the Formula One and motorsport pit stops. Now, those guys have spent the last 30 years refining that kind of process. They have very deep pockets when it comes to budgeting and the amount of people that are there, and they are extremely good at what they do. The internet is full of great examples of how four wheels are changed and some fuel thrown in there, and the car's kind of within 4 seconds it's in and out. However, that wouldn't happen if there wasn't effective communication and planning going on. There are also some interesting elements on the internet available when cars pull into pits and they're not expected, and it's not quite the same professional story that you are used to. You've got to ask yourself, if we're in a situation where we're changing from product A to product B, by the time product A finishes, we need all of the tooling, information, material, and anything else required in order to make it delivered at that time in order to minimize the times. What we don't want to do is wait for product day to finish, operator to wander off, go and find the details of what's happening next, and then start thinking about pulling together all the information. It's relatively simple, but there's a lot of it that needs to happen. And similarly, if you've got a machine and you've got startup and close down at the end of each day, you want to make sure that there is an element of standard work that supports these things and it's done in the right time to the right level every day, because we can't once we've lost that capacity, it's very expensive to get it back, if you can get it back at all. So we talk about vital signs. Historically, as a business, we've always recommended you look at quality, cost, and delivery as the vital signs for any business. The reason is if you get them wrong enough for long enough, the business dies. I think, though, however, modern businesses, we look at more data. Gone are the days of simple quality, cost, and delivery, although important in their own, insufficient. We also now have the elements of health, safety, and environmental aspects that we need to look at. So typically, most businesses, instead of just having QCD, it will now probably be HSE QCD. So we're looking at the health of our workforce, the employee well-being and welfare. We're looking at safety, we're looking at accidents or near misses, we're looking at days since last incident, those kind of things. Or environmental, it could be pushing towards carbon footprint, recycling rates, waste management, all of these sorts of bits and pieces. So now we're very much in a situation where a balanced scorecard is not just quality, cost and delivery, but it's also health, safety and environmental aspects as well. KPIs provide great visibility of what's currently happening and what has happened, and it is essential for real understanding of the process in order to have that. However, if you're only reliant on what's happening now and what's happened in the past, it's a bit like trying to drive your car using only the dashboard display and the rear view mirrors. Key activity indicators are a way to help look forward when we as we kind of process through business. Going back to our original elements of the industry forum approach, we have 5 continuous improvement process improvement spirits. The first one is to challenge all the fixed ideas. We're trying to develop a culture where we question, is this the best way to do this? It's important that we follow procedures and structures that are in place, but it's also important that we're open-minded enough to challenge how we do things. If we always do what we've always done, we will always get what we've always got. I think it's one of those definitions of madness, is to do the same thing repeatedly and expect a different result. So it's one of the first things for us. The second one is to do it now, no excuses. Again, structure and process is important, but good ideas remain only ideas until you do something about it. If there's something that's going to save us £100 a day or £100 a week, the sooner we get it implemented and rolled out, the sooner we can start banking those savings. Use your wisdom, not your money. When you look around the shop floors, there's often decades, if not hundreds of years of experience that have been around either within the business that you're operating now, or they bring experience and wisdom from other areas. So, we're looking to try and capture knowledge, experience, suggestions from people around that don't necessarily cost a lot of money to do, but can make a real difference to your business. This good old-fashioned problem solving is getting to the root cause by asking why 5 times. I always think problem solving's incorrectly named, because it's not about solving problems so much as understanding them and preventing the damn things from happening in the first place. But it's about identifying there is a gap between what we expect and what we're getting. So it is a problem. Most people, particularly if they've been in a business for a reasonable amount of time, the blinkers come on and they just see it as part of ordinary daily process. So they don't even see that there's problems. So it's important that we take a critical eye on this, and we understand that where there are problems, and realistically what we can do to improve them. And I think when it comes to improvement, our fifth one here is this concept that improvement is infinite, better isn't good enough. If you are only improving at the rate of your nearest competitor, you're effectively standing still. So it's possible to get better but fall further behind if you're not improving at the rate of the competition. And the last one, anyone who's worked on projects with myself or the rest of my colleagues, it is important that people enjoy the process. If people succeed in making things better but hate every second of it, they're less likely to support any future programs. The culture that you have within a business needs to support the individuals and the people that are working within it. So I think it's really important that we can get together and enjoy what we do. So the key activity indicators, these are things that drive behaviours that influence outcomes. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is develop a healthy culture focused on success. These can include audits, checking workplace organisation, good old 5S, 5C check sheets, audits of the quality systems, checking product quality, doing layered process audits to make sure that all the right things are being done. It's driving behaviours that have an impact on the processes and the relative effectiveness of those processes. Understanding employee engagement, having decent feedback forums, suggestion schemes, one-to-ones, business briefings, all of these sorts of things are really important. So, frequent one-to-ones, making sure you have the time, you invest the leaders' time with their people to understand how they're getting on, and whether there's anything that can be done to support them any better. I think quarterly business briefings are sensible to make sure that the individuals understand how well the overall business is doing and where the challenges are and where they fit into it. But again, a lot of this stuff will come into something I'm going to mention a bit more later, is the kind of the quality of the capability of the leaders that we have at an operational level is so important. Reward and recognition. Celebrate successes. I think it's really important to focus on achievements relating to quality, cost delivery, or health, safety, and environmental. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pay people for it. Sometimes it's helpful, but just the reward and the recognition aspect of it as well is that it's really important to celebrate success, praise in public, and if there's any challenges, you discipline in private. The routine feedback that we talked about, understand and communicate when things don't go as planned without blame. Include top level, monthly, quarterly, and local leadership daily or weekly. The team briefs are really important at the beginning of the day to make sure everybody understands what's important, what's happening that day, where the focus needs to be, and that the rest of the team is there to support them as and when required. And all of this puts a massive burden on frontline leadership, because it's up to them, either from the operations perspective, which is where my experience is, in developing, creating, and establishing a learning and supportive environment and culture. I can't overstate this enough, how important it is. If you look at the challenges that face a team leader nowadays compared to what it was 20 years ago, it's massively different. They have greater levels of responsibility relating to health and safety, to the quality of the product, the training of the people, to the relative productivity and effectiveness of the processes they're responsible to, and also more so coming towards the health, safety, and environmental aspects as well. It's something that is massively underestimated when people take on the role, and all too often people who go into these kind of levels of frontline leadership, areas of frontline leadership, they're not trained or supported. They're simply kind of put in because they have the kind of what's considered to be the right stuff, the experience, the knowledge, and the people skills. but providing them with some basic training and some more tailored development based on their personal situation and the business needs is really, really important. And I think it's also really important to walk the walk and be credible. That's not a town in Wales. It might be a town in Wales, but in this case, it stands for always do what you say you're going to do. Okay, so be credible. One of the most important aspects from any leadership. So really reviewing, when we consider modern management is a function of understanding, control and improvement, we know we need to make sure the data is objective, real, robust to help us understand what has been happening. Once we've understood what's happening, we can exhibit control. Typically, this would be through standardized work, one of the 4 building blocks that we mentioned earlier. We'd be using visual management to help us understand the top one in terms of real-time data to understand the current situation. And when we have control, we can then look at applying the process improvement activities to look at structured process improvement activities to help find areas where we can be better. Most importantly, ensure our operational leadership is consistent and credible and capable. Make sure good data is used to drive KPIs and it's telling us what's actually happening rather than just painting a happy picture that isn't necessarily true. And we use our key activity indicators to support the development of an effective culture. Business is really tough at the moment and it's not likely to get any easier anytime soon, but it isn't hopeless. We're here to support. If we're a phone, with the wonders of modern technology, we can have Teams meetings to help discuss your challenges and opportunities. It doesn't cost a thing. We can support existing programs where you may have resource or knowledge gaps, or help you develop new programs. And one of our founding principles is to help businesses to help themselves. We're not here to keep secret the tools and techniques of business improvement. We're here to support you and your people in understanding and implementing them to make your business competitive for the longer term. That's it for me. I've just had a little note come up saying there's 5 minutes left in the presentation. So if there are any questions, I'm quite happy to take them now, or feel free to contact me outside of this meeting, and I look forward to speaking with you. As we mentioned earlier, the presentation has been recorded and will be distributed afterwards. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our newsletters and follow us on LinkedIn for any of the latest updates. Okay, well, that's me. And if anybody's still awake or conscious, then please, it'd be great to hear from you. So we've got a couple of questions. With relation to effective use of available capacity in OEE, there was no mention of SMED. This is yeah, absolutely right. So I think I did mention it, but you're right, it wasn't written on the actual slides. When it comes to kind of changeovers, SMED is one of those classic things. The 4-step process is really easy to explain, really easy to get on top of and understand, but really quite a challenge to implement. So for me, the time-based planning on available capacity really helps drive that kind of SMED activity. So yeah, I really do think that when you mentioned that about SMED, it is absolutely important. It is one of those kind of specialist tools that relies on a great handling of both workplace organization and your standardization. But yeah, I would 100% agree. SMED, whether you call it SMED or changeover improvement or setup time reduction, whatever you call it, 100% agree. Can Power BI play a part in developing a balanced real-time scorecard? Yes, absolutely right, it can. Technology is moving on much faster than my ability to always understand it. But what I will say is Power BI is an excellent tool, but as with all tools, needs to be used properly and with caution. So make sure that the base data that you are using is robust and credible, and you understand what it's telling you rather than just numbers. But yes, absolutely right.
The difference between KPI versus KAI.
Okay, so a key performance indicator. So we're looking at the difference between a KPI and a KAI. So a key performance indicator is telling you of something that is actually happening or has happened. So it's at best current stroke historic, whereas a key activity is measuring or is encouraging behaviors or activities that will have an impact on KPIs in the future. So like we say is that KPIs are very much now and the past, whereas we're trying to drive behaviors and activities that will have an impact on it. So typically, a great example is your good old basic 5S daily check sheet. Trying to keep on top of your workplace organization, making sure you don't have non-essential items in there, any safety critical, quality critical or homeless items are dealt with. All of these things will have an impact on relative productivity because you spend less time looking for stuff and more time doing stuff. So it's an activity that helps drive your performance. There is no more. So if you haven't set your alarm, I suggest you may well have a meeting again in 15 minutes. But other than that, it's been a real pleasure to share this time with you. I appreciate everybody's time is very valuable. But like I say, if there's anything we can do to support, it costs nothing to talk. So please do.
Are there the contents that will need to be redeveloped or changed with regards to Industry 4.0 technology?
Yeah, I think ultimately, as I kind of alluded to, historically we looked at quality cost delivery in terms of the measures of competitiveness. That was 20 years ago that we were looking at that. In that time, it's moved on to elements including health, safety, and environmental. Industry 4.0 is it basically means there's going to be a lot more information available, and we need to basically make sure there isn't any, and I don't necessarily like the phrase, but paralysis through analysis. We understand what's happening and we use it to drive the right things, but Industry 4.0 will basically make it easier for us to see things. And there will be a transition as we we move out from the more traditional equipment to the more digital based equipment. But yeah, it is really important. So Industry 4.0 or lights off manufacturing, where machines run or factories run through the night with little or no personnel in interaction, is all areas that will help improve competitiveness going forwards. But all of it will have a fundamental reliance on the workplace organisation, understanding of the process, and rigid enforcement of standardised work. Great.
Cool. Well done.
Great. Well, Kirsty has said I am now, we're able to complete and I can be released back into society. So I wish you the very best for the rest of the day and the rest of the week. And don't be a stranger. Look forward to catching up with any or all of you at your convenience.